Hare Jagannath Vrinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Narayanam Namaskrityam Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nashtraprayeshva Patreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistaki. Continue reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 3, entitled The Marriage of Sukanya and Chayavana Muni. Text number 11. Kasyachit tvata kalasya Kasyachit tvata kalasya Kasyachit tvata kalasya Kasyachit tvata kalasya Nasatva vashamagato Nasatva vashamagato Nasatva vashamagato Nasatva vashamagato Do puchayitva provacha Do puchayitva provacha Do puchayitva provacha Do puchayitva provacha Vayo me tattam ishvaro Vayo me tattam ishvaro Vayo me tattam ishvaro Vayo me tattam ishvaro Kasya chitvata kalasya Kasya chitvata kalasya Nasatya vashamagato Nasatya vashamagato To puchayitva provacha To puchayitva provacha Vayo me dattam ishvaro Vayo me dattam ishvaro Kashitva atakalasya Kashitva atakalasya Nasatya astramagato Nasatya astramagato To puchayitva provacha To puchayitva provacha Vayo me dattam ishvaro Vayo me dattam ishvaro Kashyashitvam atakalasya Kashyatva atakalasya Nastya ashram agato Asyatva ashram agato Tu puja chitva prochava Tu puja chitva provacha Vayo me dattam ishvara Vayo me dattam ishvaro Rasya chitva ataralasya Kasya chitva atakalasya Nasatva ashramagato Nasatya ashramagato Tu pujatva provacha Tu pujayitva provacha Vayo me dattam ishvaro Vayo me dattam ishvaro. Word for word translation. Kasyachit. After some time. To. But. Ata. In this way. Kalasya. Time having passed. Nasatyo. The two Ashwini Kumaras. Ashrama. That place of Jayavana Muni. Agato. Reached. To. Unto those two. Pujaitva. Offering respectful obeisances. Provaja. Said. Vaya. You. Me. Unto me. Dattam. Please give. Ishvaro. Because you two are able to do so. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. Thereafter, some time having passed, the Ashwini Kumar brothers, the heavenly physicians, happened to come to Jayavana Muni's ashram. After offering them respectful obeisances, Jayavana Muni requested them to give him youthful life, for they were able to do so. Purport. The heavenly physicians, like the Ashwini Kumaras, could give youthful life even to one who was advanced in age. Indeed, great yogis, with their mystic powers, can even bring a dead body back to life, if the structure of the body is in order. We have already discussed this in connection with Bali Maharaj's soldiers and their treatment by Shukracharya. Modern medical science has not yet discovered how to bring a dead body back to life, or bring youthful energy to an old body. But from these verses, we can understand that such treatment is possible if one is able to take knowledge from the Vedic information. The Ashwini Kumaras were expert in Ayurveda, as was Dhanvantari. In every department of material science, there is a perfection to be achieved, and to achieve it, one must consult the Vedic literature. The highest perfection is to become a devotee of the Lord. To attain this perfection, one must consult Srimad Bhagavatam, which is understood to be the ripe fruit of the Vedic desire tree. Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam. Om Jnanati mirandasya Jnananjana shalakaya Chakshurun militan yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svavadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Badakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavasya Shri Rupam Sakrachatam Sahagana Raghunattam Pitam Tam Sachivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pada Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Scha. He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So, the blessings of the assembled Vaishnavas and the Guru Parampara. I will try to expand and elaborate on this verse and try to say something of relevance for our devotional practices. So this story of Sukanya and Chayavana Muni is one of the many examples that we find in the Srimad Bhagavatam where it's shown how powerful it is if somebody is following the principles of Dharma, principles of duty according to one's constitutional position in this material world. And there are different types of Dharma or duty. There is a material duty, material Dharma, and then there is a spiritual Dharma. The Dharma, Sanatan Dharma, eternal duty of the soul or the eternal position. Actually, duty is not a complete translation of the word Dharma. More accurate translation would be the natural position or the natural occupation. And Srila Prabhupada gives the example of sugar. The Dharma of sugar is to be sweet. The Dharma of fire is to be hot and bright. The Dharma of salt is to be salty. The Dharma of water is to be wet. So, if any of these attributes are missing, then we know that we're dealing with some different kind of substance. If there is no light coming from the sun, then it may not be the sun. or there may be something terribly going wrong up there. If water is not wet, then it can't be water. So, in the first chapter, in the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, all kinds of material dharma or religion are rejected. We have heard that the Vedic scriptures deal mainly with dharma, artha, kama and moksha, the four principles of life, or the four so-called goals of human life. But only a very small portion of the Vedic scriptures deal with the spiritual dharma or the spiritual practices directly. And it is said that Srimad Bhagavatam, here said, is the ripened fruit of the Vedic literature. Why? Because it only deals with pure devotional service. That's what the acharyas say. Now we may be wondering why there are some of these stories here that don't even mention the name of Krishna. In this chapter, I don't see. Chayavana Muni was worshipping Krishna, he went for Mangalarti, all these things. It's not there. Yeah. So, I can only understand that from the result, from what happened after this, that in this context here, it's not relevant whether they were, whether he was devotee of Krishna or devotee of Ram or whatever. Just focusing on the particular dharmic principles that they were exhibiting. And then later we can see that the descendants of Sukanya, they were actually obviously devotees. So Sukanya descendants, they were among the descendants of Sukanya were, and Jayavana Rishi, Jayavana Muni, were Revati. Revati is the wife of Lord Balaram. But we will hear that story later, how Revati became the wife of Balaram. But this is my personal understanding that Srimad Bhagavatam is focusing on particular principles and may sometimes not, in one verse or even in a whole chapter, we may not even see, how is this related directly to devotional service. But the principles that are taught through these chapters, they are actually directly bringing us closer to Krishna if we apply them. In the 10th verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is said that not 10th verse. In the 6th verse of the 2nd chapter, there is...
What canto?
First canto. Okay, try.
Okay.
Canto 1, chapter 2, text 6. The supreme occupation for all humanity is by which man can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendental Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. Savaipum samparo dharmo yato bhaktira dokshache ahaitukya pratiyata yayatma suprasidati. So, the two main things that come here is that devotional service is uninterrupted and unmotivated. And that's the level of devotional service that somebody is practicing who is very advanced in devotional service, in Bhakti Yoga. But for us, we can try to increase those two principles. So it's easier to be engaged in uninterrupted service for some time. It may also be possible sometimes to have a spark of unmotivated service. But to have both together, it may be difficult at times. So we can, increase the amount of time that we spend in devotional service or things related to Krishna, and by contemplating on Krishna and contemplating how our activities, our service is actually for the pleasure of Krishna, we can increase that quality of unmotivated service. And Srila Prabhupada always brings the situation back, he connects it to devotional service. So here, Srila Prabhupada is saying that every science has a perfection that can be achieved. But
science, did you say?
Every type of science, where is it? In every department of material science, there is a perfection to be achieved, and to achieve it, one must consult the Vedic literature. And I personally have some experience of this. Not that I achieved any perfection in anything, but I observed, at least in terms of astrology, I have a little bit inclination to astrology, and I've seen that the way astrology is very popular in the world, Western world also. But the way it is used, it's actually, it doesn't have much benefit, spiritual benefit. It doesn't have any much spiritual benefit, but also it's very inaccurate, because the people who are using it, they don't generally connect it to the Vedas. They don't generally consult the Vedic scriptures and the representatives of the Vedic scriptures, in particular in relation to the specific science they're trying to practice. And the same thing we have in medicine. Ayurveda is, this day and age is often seen as, okay, it works, it's on a long-term basis. But if you want something to really work quick, then you have to go to Western medicine. But if the Western physicians or Western medicine would actually take advantage of the knowledge of Ayurveda, they could achieve much more, even in terms of what they're trying to achieve. And I believe if you go to astronomy, science of the planets, position of the planets and things, then you can see that in the Vedas there are already, many of these things are already mentioned, even distance of planets. It may not be always 100% accurate, but in the Vedic context generally it's not so certain things which are not so relevant, they may not be so accurate, or vice versa. But you can very accurately still calculate the position of the planets in, for example, in astrological chart, even without knowing the distance, exact distance of planets. But like certain planets, like Pluto, Uranus, Neptune, they've just been discovered very short time ago, a few decades, some of them. While in the Vedic scriptures they are actually, you can find them, but yeah, it's just an example how the Vedic scriptures, they give the context, the higher context to the material existence and also the spiritual value of different things. So Srila Prabhupada is here saying the highest perfection to be achieved is to become a devotee of Krishna. And that's the purport of the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. So if we understand this, then we can see the whole Srimad Bhagavatam in the context. So again, this story, like the situation in this story, in today's society would be quite inappropriate, you could say. First of all, what's the name of Sukanya? No, that's her husband. Sukanya's father, Saryati, King Saryati, he gave his daughter in marriage to this old Muni, who is said here that he could have been her grandfather. So in modern society this would not be very, this would be a scandal, kind of, obviously. And it would be, especially for that girl, Sukanya. From the modern point of view, it would have been, disaster. But because in the Vedic time, there are different values. Today everything is only centered around sense gratification, but in the Vedic paradigm, the value is generally dharma. And the reason is because there is a realization of the benefit of doing this. There's a much higher reward than focusing on sense gratification. I often have personally, I read scriptures, and it's generally difficult to apply certain principles directly. Just copy paste doesn't really work. You actually have to be able to understand what are the time, place, and circumstances that were available at that time, which in this context is, the Vedic culture was fully intact, I believe, and now it's completely different. But the general principle always applies in this particular situation. It's talking about chastity. I think Revatinanda Prabhu was talking about this yesterday. And also, the more those principles are present in the society, the more the effect can be seen if something goes wrong. Like Sukanya, she pierced the eyes of Jagannath Muni, and as a result, the soldiers of Saryati, they had digestive issues. And Prabhupada gives an example of how in the pure Vedic society, any small mistake can be very easily identified. Or he says that in a village there was one bull. His horns were caught in a fence, and the people of the village came, and they were trying to find a way to get the bull out of the fence. And then somebody came past and said, "Just cut off the horns." So this is obviously not a really nice thing to do, especially the bull is considered a representation of dharma, and there were many other ways to do it, cut the fence, whatever. So then the villagers were contemplating, how is it possible that he is making such a suggestion even? And they found out that when he was born, just after he was born, the mother was looking outside the window, and the butcher walked past with some carcasses on his back. So as a result, they concluded as a result of this, actually this impression stayed with the child, that this inauspicious impression, killing an animal, harming an animal. But today's society is so mixed up. There's hardly any principles of Dharma are being practiced, or in a very perverted way. And as a result, it's very difficult to identify if there is something wrong. And for us devotees, it's we're trying to follow certain Vedic principles, especially, of course, whatever Srila Prabhupada taught us, trying to maintain cleanliness, certain way to respect each living entity, specifically devotees, different seniors and juniors, how to deal with people. Then all the principles of worship are also Vedic principles, even in non-Vaishnava tradition. Offering food is there to different demigods, whatever. So we're trying to apply some of these Vedic principles, and we can see the benefit that we become more sensitive to the effect of our activities. We become more in tune. And it's said that Krishna is the most subtle. So there's different levels of subtlety. But Krishna is, although he is spiritual, completely spiritual, he is also considered the most subtle. And to perceive Krishna, we must make our consciousness more subtle, more refined. And that can be achieved by these practices. So the Ashwini Kumaras, they were physicians, and they were expert in Ayurveda, as explained here. And from this example here, it can be seen that Ayurveda is actually, if somebody is really expert, it can be very effective. In this particular instance, the Ashwini Kumaras were able to give a youthful body again to this old Muni. So we can hope that in the future the modern scientists will take more advantage of the Vedic sciences, including Ayurveda, Dhanurveda, what else? There's these, are they called Vedangas? Are they called Vedangas or Upavedas? I think there's 3 of them. 4. Anyway, one of them is Ayurveda, of course. And then there is Jyotir Veda of the planets. And these sciences are very powerful. So, I think I conclude here. Main message of this verse, of course, is that to become a devotee is the highest perfection, and any perfection in any particular activity or science, it can be achieved by consulting the Vedic literature or the representatives of the Vedic literature. Questions? Comments?
Spark of a motivated service, is what you said during the class. This motivated service relate to motivated service where you don't think about yourself and you're totally absorbed in serving Krishna. And my second question relating to that is, can you then have a motivation to serve Krishna, but then your service becomes motivated by the desire of serving Krishna? So it becomes from unmotivated, becomes motivated, but not on the self-gratification platform.
Thank you. So question is, can we from unmotivated service develop the motive to serve Krishna? Yeah. So generally when you also hear about being silent. Being silent is a quality of a devotee. But it doesn't mean that one does not speak at all. It means one speaks only about Krishna. In the same way, to become desireless means to become free from material desires. But the soul by nature always has desire. It's one of the attributes of the soul. But that desire is, when it's in its pure state, it's the desire only to serve Krishna. And in the same way, the motive of serving Krishna is unmotivated in the material sense. So yeah. But of course there are different can be different definitions of unmotivated. Like oftentimes people who serve the society are considered very, very virtuous because they don't think about themselves, like they want to serve the public. But that's, from a spiritual sense, it's not unmotivated because it gives some higher, it's a more advanced level of consciousness, but ultimately it still gives some material comfort. It's a material level still. The spiritual level, it's only for Krishna. That's the main difference. Thank you. So, and here, just in time for Prashadam. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.